everyone for joining us. On behalf of Katie Elvidge, who couldn't be with us today, and myself, we're super excited that you could join us for the call. Um, and we also will be placing this presentation on our ILSSCom site so you can view it later. We noticed last time we had quite a few views. So we're excited for any of you who can get this information that we are really excited to present to you today. And so we're going to get started, and we just have a small crew with us. So please, if you have questions, type those into the chat, and Janine will make sure that I stop and address those. Or you can just stop me at any time if you have specific questions. So our topic for today's call is strategies for social science inquiry. And if you'll see on our screen that we have a document, which is the one I'll be talking about today, called the Inquiry-Based Social Science, Instructional Planning and Strategies. And this is our new inquiry kit that we hope that you will have a chance to dive into, especially as we look to school starting in the fall, about how maybe we can get these tools in our classroom and maybe in the hands of more of our teachers. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And just a quick reminder of, first of all, I'm clicking and it's not moving. Janine, what am I doing wrong? Huh. Well.
Maybe.
Oh, here we go. It's slow. Okay. Wow, I hope it doesn't stay this slow the whole time. We want to start off with what is inquiry, and the document that I referred to on the screen at the beginning. It is a 21-page document, I believe, and we're actually going to go through it pretty quick because it just has a number of great resources for our teachers, and it does start off with this definition as well. What is inquiry? And it's a complex process where students are going to attempt to convert information into useful knowledge. And that's a complex process for all of us, not just for students. And if you look at all of the key skills that students and others need to do as they go through the inquiry process, you can see that this is what makes it complex. There's a lot of things that students have to do when they really go through the inquiry process. And keep in mind that a true inquiry is an ongoing cycle. And what we mean by that is, right in the middle of your inquiry, or even at the end of it, you've come up with even more questions, which can spark more inquiries, and it can keep going and going and going. There's this great visual. I really like this visual that Trevor McKenzie and Rebecca Bathurst Hunt have come up with that show the different types of inquiry that students can engage with in the classroom. And as you can see, as you move from left to right, that there are 4 different types. And free inquiry is where they completely and totally choose their topics and just go with it. But where we begin is a structured inquiry. So if someday students want to jump into their own free inquiry, they have a model of how it is done. And so this free inquiry is the most freedom, of course. And in his 2018 book, McKenzie argues that they all have a place in the classroom. And when determining the most appropriate form, you have to think about your students, the time you have, how old your students are, your curriculum constraints, and all of those things that go into play. And I would typically look at it as I would probably begin my school year with a structured inquiry so they can really look at how one's done, move towards more controlled, and hopefully by the end of the year, you're just guiding students through an inquiry process. And just use your professional judgment as to what form is best suited for your class. There are graphics that we have made for our Illinois educators. And I will tell you where I will take you to at the end of the presentation. We'll show you where each grade level graphic is, and they're tailor-made for each grade. But they all have these 5 stages to guide the inquiry process. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look through each of these stages, talk about what we have in the kit for you, as well as additional resources that might help you. So we're going to begin with the first box, the engage and ask. And if you look at the icon at the top, it'll remind you of where we are on that graphic. So we're at the first stop, which is engage and ask. And this is really where we look at what we're addressing, what we're studying in the classroom. And what are the big questions you want your students to answer at the end of your unit, and the takeaways, the standards that you really want them to master. And also, and very importantly, how are we going to engage or interest your students in this topic? How do we grab their attention and their interest? And what type of text or sources can we use to grab or engage students? And then we want to find out from your students. Once you've maybe determined a piece of artwork you want to show them, or a video clip, or read a portion of a text, or show them a poem, or even just ask them a question, then we want to find out, what are your kids wondering about? This is where we're going to get them engaged in the process. And that's going to give you insight in some of their background knowledge and actually a little bit about their curiosity about this particular topic. And of course, there may be so many questions that come out of this first phase or stage. You have to think about which of these questions are manageable within the time constraints of our unit. We may not be able to address everything that our kids want to know. So we have to figure that out after they start asking the questions. So when you look at the 2 bullet points that the arrow is pointing to, these 2 are very, very important as a teacher to really direct the inquiry to. You've got to think about, what is it that we're after in this unit? What are those big questions, or the essential questions, whatever you want to call it, and what is manageable within our unit? So you may have to direct kids or direct the conversation towards what you can actually accomplish in the classroom. And of course, you're going to think of that when you're looking at what source or video or picture you're going to be using at the beginning. So with our engage and ask stage or phase, there are a number of strategies that we will include in our inquiry kit. And this is page 8 if you happen to be following along with me. And so the strategies that we have listed here are ones that you need to consider when we're deciding on what image or quote or video clip or text or question that we are presenting to students. So there are things that we've known about for years. One is just a basic brainstorm, you know. We brainstorm all of the questions the kids have about a topic. A KWL is also a great tool. What we know, what our what I know, what I want to know, and what I've learned, sorry. And there are a number of variations of a KWL that we place inside the kit for you. There's the KWHL, there's all sorts of other variations of what we can use to really get students engaged in asking. Um, I will talk about the question formulation technique a little bit more because this is a fantastic resource that maybe even some of you are using. And if so, and you want to share how maybe that's used in your classroom or how you've seen it used, then feel free to stop me. But that question formulation technique offers a variety of resources for teachers. If you click on, or if you go to rightquestion.org, you will come to their website, the Right Question Institute. And when you go onto their website, you're going to create an account, and it's free, but that will open up a world of resources for your classroom or for your school. And you'll get to see videos of teachers implementing the question formulation technique and a number of other tools. There's also a great worksheet that I'm going to click on here that's linked at the top that Katie and I made from or modified from the Right Question Institute, where it easily takes you through all of the stages for this phase of the inquiry process. First of all, you'll be able to see that students or you can just use this graphic organizer to take you through the steps where you ask the questions, you sort them, categorize them, revise them, prioritize them. And that way it gives you a more reasonable amount of questions that are really targeting what your students want to know. Sorry, hang on. And so that will be available within the kit as well. Now we're going to jump, or any questions about the first stage, the engage and ask, before we jump into think critically. Okay, we'll go right to think critically. And if you'll see, I've got that highlighted on the icon at the top. This is the second stage. And we want our students to think critically. And so I think this one offers a lot of resources that I think teachers will really like to get their hands on, because getting kids to think critically can be a challenge. In fact, you know, reflecting back to when I was in school, many times I would hear the teacher thinking critically to tell me what they think I should think. And then I was supposed to regurgitate that information out on an assessment or an assignment. In reality, what we want kids to do is we want them to think critically. So really thinking about how we're going to make this portion of the inquiry process powerful. And so to really think through something, they're going to need to gather and understand information. And we know in social science, we want them to look at more than one source about a piece of information. And we want them to critically analyze those sources and be able to think about, are they valid, reliable? Are these resources biased? And so I think this portion of the process may take the longest time to actually do, and it probably needs to. There are some tools and strategies we think teachers might like. There are some progressive graphic organizers, and we call them progressive because they just kind of make you stop and think about different components. Kids a lot of times want to just read something or watch something and then just they write down a quick answer so they can get their assignment done, and we really want them to think critically. So some progressive graphic organizers we'll talk about will help lend itself to thinking critically, as well as writing or drawing to organize their thoughts. Collaboration or discussion techniques is very important. I know when I need to think critically about something, Like if I'm getting some insurance papers in my mail and then I'm reading this complex text and I really need to think critically about these papers, I like to have a discussion with someone about them. Do you think they mean this? What do you think this means? How do you feel about that? And that discussion can actually help further refine someone's thinking. So let's look at some of the strategies and note that we might mention some of these same strategies in the Think Critically section, as well as some of the other phases of the inquiry process because they fit there too. So we'll begin with some ones that you may have heard before. And this is on, if you're following along, pages 9 and 10 of the inquiry kit. And they're spelled out in more detail. And all of these have links to samples. And that's what will be really great. To get kids thinking about things and even writing or drawing, think, pair, share is a great idea. However, if you're a student and you go through 6 classes in a day and you've had 3 think, pair, shares already on a Monday, you're getting a little tired of the same think, pair, share. Well, we've created a resource that has so many variations of this process that takes it a step further and has students do some different things with it that we think that might liven things up a bit and get students engaged. We also have some sentence stems that you might find beneficial, especially for getting kids to discuss things. And then sometimes they don't know a proper way of agreeing or disagreeing with each other or adding additional information. These sentence stems just have are open-ended sentences where it gives students options on how to agree, disagree, add clarifying information, ask questions, summarize. We have all sorts of different sentence stems that might be helpful. Some teachers like to take some of the sentence stems that they like the most, put them on like a bookmark and give each kid one, or make a table tent in a small group in a classroom and have those sentence stems on it so they can just briefly look at them. And if they're wanting to agree with what someone said, then they've got a way to phrase it. Another resource we have is a textbook activity guide, originally created by Janet Allen, a literacy guru. And this gives, I look at textbook activity guides as I think the new improved study guide. Study guides can be a awful thing to give students if it's a way of just plopping in some information where they memorize and regurgitate on a test. Our textbook activity guides that we created or found from other resources actually make it more engaging for students and require them to think, even discuss, and maybe even draw or do some different things that will help them think critically. So there's a link in the kit as well for some textbook activity guides. There is another strategy, read, rate, reread. Kelly Gallagher, a high school teacher, developed this strategy when he had a honors student in one of his courses say, as they were reading a text, honors student, let me say, who is this Al guy you are talking about or they're talking about? And Mr. Gallagher looked at the text and said, that's Al Qaeda. And she goes, well, anyway, you can see his devastation at, okay, we need to get students reading what's going on in the world. And he's an English teacher. And we need to have them be able to take a complex piece of text and really read through it to try to understand it and think critically. Well, a lot of students do the same thing, and in all classes, they read it and say, "Oh, I either get it or I don't," and move on. But the read, rate, reread has students read maybe a short segment of something. Let's take, for instance, the first paragraph of Thomas Paine's Common Sense. Now, if you have that in front of you, and you read through that paragraph, that's some complex text where you have to have some background knowledge and other information in order to really understand it. So I gave this to a group of teachers and I said, read it and rate your reading 1 to 10 on your comprehension. And many of them rated themselves like a 2 or a 3 or a 1. The second stage was, okay, read it again and then rate yourself. Each time they went through the steps that I'm going to mention, their rating increased. The third thing they do is talk about it with their partner. Fourth thing, write about it. And when you write about something you read, it forces you to have to organize information in your brain to be able to write it out. And so that strategy really helps students know that sometimes if you read it again or engage with it in other ways, you can actually comprehend complex text better. Some other strategies, pocket questions. That's another great way to get a stalled conversation started, or a way to encourage students to take their discussion in a new direction. We have some samples of back pocket questions in the kit. Sketch to stretch is another strategy that involves drawing. We have some samples in the kit, and sketch notes as a visual note taking. Some of your students will really enjoy sketch notes. And let's look at some of those. The second one I'm putting up, it looks very detailed. You can sketch note a section of the chapter or a chapter of the textbook or any section of it where you are pulling out the most important points. You can give them guidelines or questions that they need to answer in their sketch notes, but they can either draw a visual, a cartoon, anything like that. And some students, some top students don't like that because they don't want to draw many times. And then other students that are not interested in many things but can draw really engage with this. If you can draw what you read about, then you probably really understand it. Um, so we have samples of these textbook activity guides and sketch notes in the kit as well. All right, now we're into the third phase of the inquiry, which is draw conclusions. And this is where we're wanting to kind of answer those questions that we started with. Synthesize their ideas to draw their conclusions, kind of like this funnel where there's a lot of ideas coming through into the funnel, but at the bottom, this is our conclusion we've drawn, or one or two pieces of a conclusion. We want to also, like, I came up with this conclusion because I have evidence to support that from my sources, not because that's what I think or what my dad told me at home. Um, so on pages 11, 12, if you're following along in the inquiry kit, we have some strategies for drawing conclusions. And once again, it's also wonderful to have a discussion.
Kathy? We're having some technical difficulties. Hold on a moment.
I don't know what happened, but you're back. Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Everything disappeared, then it came back. Interesting.
Your internet service was interrupted briefly. I'm sure that's
Okay. Whew. All right. Um, so we don't want those groups where, we'll sit back and let Sally do all the work and report out for our group, and then we all get the same grade, an A, when Sally did all the work. We want students to always have to show their work independently too. Um, okay, some of the strategies for the inquiry kit, and they're not coming up now, which makes me think that my services, we're getting ready to get a nice little storm here. So I'll talk about the strategies that I know are coming up here whenever my computer decides to join with me. Um, One of the strategies, oh, these are ones we've already talked about. You can do a think, pair, share, or those variations on our document as well. Um, a Another great strategy, and it's called numbered heads or talking chips for collaboration and discussion. Talking chips is where you give each of your students in a group maybe two little poker chips or little discs, colored discs that you can get at Walmart. And they all have the same number. And maybe the teacher poses a question after people have gone through the other stages of the inquiry process, where we're revisiting those big questions we asked at the beginning. And then they have to actually um, answer the question, but each time they do, they put in one of those chips. And you can use your sentence stems too. But once they use up their chips, they can't talk anymore. And then the students, um, all students have to use all their chips. And even if they say and put in a chip, I agree with Sally that so and so, or I disagree, or I'm confused, it still requires everyone to have some sort of discussion and not let it be run by one or two other people. Okay, my screen's still not coming up, so I'll tell you some other things on this slide. Um, Numbered heads is another great strategy that we'll be referring to in the inquiry kit, which also requires students to answer questions, collaborate, and divide up into different groups, and collaborate and divide up into different groups, and so on. Numbered head also is a great strategy to keep all your kids engaged because they don't know when you're going to be calling on them. Okay, never had that happen before. Hey, Janine, do you have the PowerPoint? You might want to try to bring it up and share your screen, and I'll talk about it.
Yeah, I'm bringing it up right now.
All right. So there's a few other strategies that were in the previous phase of the inquiry that also work with drawing conclusions. Those graphic organizers that I talked to you about, they have a drawing conclusions part at the end. So it helps them think critically throughout the graphic organizer, and then all of a sudden they're having to give their conclusion at the end. Okay. Can you go ahead and share, Janine? I'll keep talking while she's.
Yeah, keep talking. I'm like 2 seconds away from having it up.
No problem. So anytime we want them to come to a conclusion, oh, now I can see anyway, we can use some of the strategies that we used in the think critically phase. But the key is, once again, don't forget to let students also do independent work about what they have come to conclusions about. All right, if you will jump on to see next one and next one, because I think I talked about everything on this one. Yeah. Okay. Go back one. There we go. This is just showing you that Kelly Gallagher has a website. We have a link to it on in our kit. And on his website, you click resources, and he has an archived. He's the one that, based on that Al Qaeda comment by a student, has all of these what they call article of the week, and how he has those students respond to a question about the article, and they have to put in their conclusion. Dave Stewart Jr., one of my favorite educators, has made even better, not better, scaffolded for students who don't automatically know how to just write about a topic or answer a question. He has made some scaffolded graphic organizers that help students think through and draw conclusions on his as well. So we have that link in the kit, and I think teachers can get a lot of great information on scaffolding something like that for students. And then by the end of the year, I want students to be able to do it more independently. Okay, next slide. Okay, the last stage of the inquiry process is communicate findings. Well, it's not the last, it's next to the last stage. The communicate findings, and this is where we're going to note what methods students are going to be used to demonstrate what they have learned. And they're going to answer the overall questions of the unit that we started off with. And this can be a unit assessment as long as it connects to those unit objectives. Okay. They also need to think through, who are we going to be sharing this information with? It could be just the teacher, but students, I think, will really think through making it really spectacular if they have to share it with other students, classmates, kids in a younger grade. And here in Carlinville, where I live, we had a group of students just do a civics unit on not doing the fallback time change. And so they presented their findings or communicated their findings with our state senator. So, boy, they were so excited and completely and totally engaged with this because that was going to be their audience. Okay. Next. There we go. Also, with the communicate findings, a strategy that we have listed inside our kit is the claims, evidence, and reasoning strategy. Allowing students to not only say, this is my finding, okay, or this is the claim, but here's the evidence and the reasoning in order to get to that. And Janine, that's really a science strategy, isn't it?
Oh, it might have started as social science. I'm not sure. Social science and science both have a pretty heavy claim to that, but we're now starting to see teachers using this as a tool in math classrooms too. So they're making a claim in math class, like an odd number plus an odd number will always give you an even number. And then they are having students provide the evidence and the reasoning to support their claim.
Awesome. So this is a strategy that can really go into all content areas. As being an ELA person as well, we have got claims, evidence, and reasoning embedded in our standards. So this can be a school-wide strategy that can really be looked at as well. Okay, next we have products that students may be used to presenting, posters or flyers or brochures or cartoons and comic strips. Tic-tac-toe choice board, a way of differentiating where they get to pick from a list of projects. Also being careful always to not send it home and bring back a project from the parents, if you know what I mean. I so remembered a project that I made my son do, but it had my stamp of creativity all over it while I was shouting from the other room, "You ought to do this to it now. You ought to add this for color." And sometimes it just unlevels the playing field when we let them do too much of that at home. Presentations, PowerPoint presentations, commercials, rap song, acting out something, a common craft video, which I'll show you a sample of, and museum box style video can also be ways of communicating their findings. Okay, Janine? We're going to look at a couple of these on the next slide. And if we'll click on the video of the election of 1824, Janine, we're going to watch that and see what a student did to communicate his findings. As long as it works. It did earlier.
Unmute myself.
By Ian and Griffin. One of the most heated presidential elections for the U.S. was probably in 1824. It was between three main candidates, Andrew Jackson, John Adams, and Henry Clay. All were Republicans. When the voting came around, Jackson won the most popular vote and won the most electoral votes. But according to the U.S. Constitution, he did not have a high enough percentage of electoral votes. So the House of Representatives had a revote. This time, Adams beat Jackson. But before the revote, Clay made a deal with Adams. Clay knew he wasn't going to win, and he didn't want Jackson to win. So Clay told Adams, "I will tell everyone to vote for you instead of me, if you appoint me Secretary of State." Jackson's supporters were enraged with the corrupt bargain. Corruptions and intrigues at Washington defend the will of people, Jackson claimed. The slaveholding South did not like Adams because of this bargain he made with Clay. He lost his popularity there. Adams took office and lost his public support even more. He appointed Clay Secretary of State, which further proved that they had made the bargain. After that, not only did the South not like him, but also the rest of the country. Adams proposed ideas to expand federal fundings of things like roads, canals, scientific research, and education. Congress rejected most of his proposals, but agreed on some of them. Although one historian said Adams was one of the most intelligent, courageous, experienced, and public-spirited of all our presidents, most will still say he was far less effective than any other president. And that was the election of 1824. The end.
We have that video linked in the kit as well to take a look. And, you know, that, to me, sometimes I think it's so frightening for students to get it in front of the whole class and do an entire presentation. Just the nervousness of it. But when you can record and adjust and revise and edit before you let the class see this, then students have a chance to do their very best work. And he just did his own drawings and communicated his findings through that video. We have another example. Museum box is what this was called. It's no longer available. I think it's now only a paid thing. But let's look at a little bit of this one on causes of the Civil War.
On the screen are 6 images. These 6 images are the 6 main causes for the Civil War. Image 1 is Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin was a book written by Harriet Beecher Stowe about a farm that owned slaves, and it told people what slavery really was. It showed what horrible lives slaves had and let the world know. This book was the bestseller of the nation right after the Bible. Uncle Tom's Cabin not only warned the North, but infuriated the South and made the sectionalism between the two even worse. Image 2, the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a period of time where the North was bursting into cities and factories, while the South was staying put, wanting to keep the old-fashioned lifestyle in place. Because of this, the North and South had different opinions on just about everything. This would have been the first real sign of separation in the nation, therefore, the first sign of sectionalism. Image 3 resembles bleeding Kansas. Features Bibles were weapons smuggled into Kansas to protect them. Reason being, Kansas was allowed popular sovereignty on whether they were going to be
That's good, Janine. Okay, so the idea is for Museum Box is they just collect 6 images, or don't do it electronically. Just get a box and either put in images you found or recreate whatever it is you're talking about in your classroom. And they pull out an image from their museum box that communicates their findings. And of course, it doesn't have to be 6, but that was the premise of this museum box online resource, and they had a digital library full of things. And so, but it's a paid subscription now, I believe, and so you can look into that as well. Um, so now on to the final stage of the inquiry process, and that is reflection. And this one tends to get like ignored because we're always in a hurry to like, okay, move on to the next unit. When in reality, this is a very important time for students to really think about what it is they've learned. So go ahead and click for me, Janine, on this one. We want to know, how has their thinking changed based on what they learned through this process? I would want to know exactly what it was that maybe changed their beliefs or their behaviors, and giving them a chance to really spend some time reflecting. Okay. There are some tools that also can help with reflecting strategies, and we're on page 15 and 16 of the inquiry kit. And once again, think, pair, share is another way. You come up with what you want to think about, give them the question that has them reflect, and then do any of those variations. You can have them use sentence stems to discuss with other students before maybe they write. A 3-2-1 is also a great idea. And Econ Illinois, which we have a link to in the kit, has a 3-2-1 with we want 3 takeaways, 2 questions, and 1 thing they enjoyed as part of the reflection. We don't want this to be the conclusion. We want conclusions need to have some substance, but we want a reflection, which should be easy and enjoyable for the kids as well. Econ Illinois also came up with the MRI strategy, M standing for main idea, R for reflect on the meaning, and I for the implications to my life. And then, of course, there's exit note and exit tickets, reflection questions that you come up with yourself. You can even give a survey about the inquiry process. Sketch notes can also provide a way for offering a reflection, and we have some links to Kathy Schrock's sketch notes, who has everything about sketch notes you wanted to know in that link. And We Are Teachers site, we have that linked as well. They have 10 creative ways sketch notes can be utilized on that as well. Okay. Next, there we go. Now I'm going to take you, well, first of all, that is the inquiry process in a nutshell. Any questions before I show you where the resources are? Or comments? Okay, you want to click on the link there, and we are going to jump and show you where we can get this inquiry kit that we're super proud of. If you go to the ILSSocialScienceInAction.org, which can be viewed from going on to our whole team's website, ILClassroomsInAction.org, we'll be able to see the website, hopefully, shortly. And there are, if you go to the very top, underneath Illinois Social Science in Action, there's a resource button. And when you hover on the resource button, you're going to see Illinois resources and other resources. Since we created it just for Illinois and based on our standards, you're going to want to click Illinois resources. And then you will see our newest released resources at the top. So right here, this is the newest thing we've released. It's the inquiry kit. And this is the document. If you want to go ahead and click on the document for us, Janine, click right on the document. And everything we just went through, and we talked about the different pages that the strategies were on. You'll find it all right in this kit. Also, and whenever it completely comes up, Janine, if we can scroll to the appendices near the back, I wanted to show you a couple things that I really like about the appendices. The appendices has a page of resource links and some strategy handouts. And so what I like about the first page in the appendices, if it decides to come up, if not, I'll just describe it. Voila. Okay. Well, that's the beginning. Yeah. Go ahead and find the appendices. Oh, there's a table of contents too to help you find your way through it. And the first page of the appendice has the URLs for all the resources that we've linked within the document, all on one page in order that they occurred. And so we have one page just of that. That'll pop up in just a second. It's not wanting to download fast, is it? Voila! There they are. That's all the URLs to all the resources that we talked about. And then the page after that one is just a blank graphic of the inquiry process that all teachers will have one of their grade level that I'll show you in a second. The next page 2 is the question formulation technique that I showed you as well that we developed. All right, great. Thank you, Janine. Now let's hop back to the website. And right underneath this document, the kit, are all of the grade-specific resources. So does anyone want to pick a certain grade level, or just show your how many fingers up for what grade level you want me to pick, or just speak into your mic? Oh, I see third. Was that third?
Or 12th.
Or 12th. 12th. 1, 2.
There's a big difference there.
Woo, big difference. All right. So we have ones for kindergarten all the way up. I mean, this can even be a school-wide PD, and then everybody dives into their own specific doc. I've noticed, and I was going to mention to Katie, that error comes up real quick, but then the document shows up right after the word error for some reason. But we'll explore why that's happening this week later on. So what's unique about each one of these is you will find not only the graphic, but little bullet points within each phase of the inquiry process that helps you really understand the must-haves or the needs that you need to do in order to get to that main question. And so it's coming up.
Maybe.
Maybe. If not, I'll do my best to visually describe it. And so within each of those boxes, oh, it's coming?
Yep.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. There we go. So you'll see some bullet points, and that gives the teachers a lot of support on what I need to do in order to get them to engage and ask. what do I need to do to get them to think critically? These are the components that are necessary to do each of those phases. Then on the left-hand side, and this looks different. We're going to pull up an elementary one after this one. The left-hand side describes the process as well. And when you get to the second page of this, because this is a high school one, it gives you kind of a working tool to where you have your standards, your demystifying. I'm reading that. Janine, can you read out loud for me the top of developing? Oh, okay. So you'll notice your inquiry standards right there for your teachers. And then right next to it, they can say, okay, my World War II unit, our unit on financial literacy or whatever it is, okay, when we're doing this one, we're hitting these standards of the inquiry. And sometimes you just need time to sit down and think to ourselves, okay, are we hitting these standards and with what units? And if they put nothing next to specific standards, then that tells them something too. And so it's a good working tool. Let's see if we can bring up an elementary one, which looks a little bit different, still has the same components, but we know our elementary teachers who are teaching not only ELA, science, and social science and math, that we've got all of their social science standards right there for them on this graphic and a planning tool as well. So on the left side of this front page, they have the inquiry standards here. And then on the second page, they will have their disciplinary concepts, the civics, the economics, the geography, and the civics, economics, and history. And history on the second page of this document. And then a space to write out there what units are helping us get to my standards. And so that just opens up a lot of conversation for our teachers to have. Okay, if we don't have any units to go with our first two standards, then that tells us where we need to add something. If we have some units that we have that don't fit any of those, then do we need to keep those units? And so it really offers an opportunity, these documents, to not only talk about the inquiry process, but to talk about those things that we are teaching in our classroom and maybe things we need to add or delete or tweak. Okay. Now is finally a chance for me to stop talking and to ask if you have any specific comments or questions about the inquiry kit or just inquiry and process. And as Janine is scrolling through there, underneath all of what we just shared are all of our other resources as well that are Illinois specific. Questions? Comments? Joke? Janine, even though math doesn't call it inquiry, correct?
Science, we don't use the word inquiry.
That's right. That's right. We still should be doing things like this in all of our content areas, correct?
Right. Our science standards, the next generation science standards, are the way that they're written describe quality inquiry in science and what that should look like. So they avoid the word inquiry within the standards themselves, just because in science, inquiry has kind of been misused in the past. So they avoided that, and everything, all of the standards are written to really direct teachers on how students should be doing inquiry.
And the ELA standards for social studies, which I know many teachers, I don't know if they delve into those like we want them to, but if you are using the inquiry process with your social science standards, you're hitting most of your literacy standards. So I think that also makes it really powerful about something to address with our teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's not any questions, then we can let you off 5 minutes early because I know you have a lot going on. But we just want to thank you so much for attending. And for those of you who are listening later, if you have any questions, please email Katie or I. Our email addresses were on the beginning of the presentation, and we'd be more than happy to assist you.
And I'm going to provide a link to our post survey too in the chat window. So everybody, please take the really short post survey for us.
Thanks all so much. Have a great day.